Hello, welcome to the Field of Feast podcast. I'm your host, Jed Conklin. Today we have Chef Chad White, our first guest on this inaugural episode. If you haven't had the chance yet to go to the First Light YouTube channel and check out our first episode of the actual show by the same name, Field of Feast, go do that. And you'll see that Chef Chad White and I go on his first ever whitetail deer hunt. The show concept is basically taking chefs out who have never hunted and fished before and teach them how to procure their own ingredients to kind of help close the food loop for them. We'll get into more of that today when we're talking with Chad. The podcast is going to go in association with that, but we're going to dive into other details in the hunting world, the conservation world, the food world. We're gonna deep dive on all kinds of fun topics. This is our first one, like I said. So Chad White is here with us. Chad, let's hear your voice.
What's up, brother? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for being the guinea pig for this new project all the way through the beginning. Chad and I met a long time ago when he first moved back to Spokane from San Diego, and we'll also touch on some of that. But he was looking at one of my spaces in a building that I own downtown, and ultimately ended up becoming my own restaurant, Hunt, because he went elsewhere, which is great. Probably worked out for the better in the end. And in the process of opening that restaurant, I was reacquainted with Chad from the time I'd met him when we did that walkthrough, and a couple other chefs that had, we'd come to know in the process of opening my restaurant with another chef, Chef Tony Brown. And they had this bro get-together dinner functions every, few weeks. And I sure as hell wasn't going to cook for them. So I'd bring wild game. And, of course, the bourbons were getting served. And next thing you know, we're telling hunting stories. And then, of course, they now want to go hunting. None of them have ever been hunting. And they've all been on TV. Chad's a Top Chef alum, and some of the other chefs have been on some other the TVs, and they're like, let's record this. Let's go hunting. You teach us how to do it. We'll record it. That was 4 years ago, Chad. We just shot our first pilot in November and on my farm in Hancock County, Kentucky. Chad, let's dive in a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Jed.
For sure.
It's an honor. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you. But I'm from Spokane, Washington, born and raised. Grew up in the Spokane Valley. My family had a family farm out in Addy, Washington, and spent a lot of my, I would say, my free time on the ranch, on the farm. Instead of doing all the spring break activities with my friends and playing ball and whatnot. So I got acquainted with a lot of work or chores, if you will, from changing irrigation, milking cows, cleaning out calf things, all kinds of stuff like that. I joined the Navy on 9/11, was stationed in San Diego. My job in the military was a cook. It actually was the only thing that I qualified for that had a job attached to it instead of being an airman, seaman, or fireman. Never really had an interest in cooking. Lots of interest in eating, but never really thought about being a cook ever in my life. But hey, I ended up falling in love with it. Kind of took the bull by its horns, if you will. Learned a lot about cuisine. Started traveling the world with the military, and then later when I got out, continued my culinary career after my time in the service. Worked with the Hilton hotel properties. I worked with Hotel del Coronado. Opened up my first restaurant. I think it was in like 2007, 2008. Opened up about 5 restaurants in San Diego between um, seafood restaurants, pizza restaurants, fast casual, fine dining, so on and so forth. Even one in Tijuana called La Costina before competing on Top Chef on season 13. After that, I decided to move back home where I'm from in Spokane and opened up my first restaurant shortly after meeting Jed called Zona Blanca Ceviche Bar. After that, I opened up another 4 restaurants: High Tide Lobster Bar, TT's Old Iron Brewery and Barbecue, and Unama's Taco Shop. And then, getting to know Jed, spent some time out in the woods, roughing it a little bit, learn how to or be reacquainted with a gun, if you will. It's been a long time. I hadn't shot a gun since I was in the military, and yeah, here we are.
Remember Zona Blanca opening. I remember being slightly disappointed it wasn't in my own building, but I was very excited for you. I'd gotten to know you just a little bit when we had met briefly just for that first walkthrough, and then I remember following your story along. Um, so real quick, let's touch on you. You left San Diego to move back to your hometown in Spokane, and you didn't have your family in tow at that time, right? Something had transpired between your restaurant career in San Diego and moving to Spokane. What ultimately made the decision to come back home, and how did that how did that affect you personally?
Yeah, so in the midst of opening up multiple restaurants in San Diego and in Mexico, I uh you know I struggled in my marriage, right? To give a little bit of context, my previous wife and I met while I was taking a second job while working in the military, which is kind of like a big no-no. But I was on shore duty after an injury that I had. I had a full reconstruction of my left knee. So I was on limited duty. And the job that I had on base was I worked in the barracks because I couldn't really work in the kitchen because I was recovering from knee surgery. So I worked in the barracks. I checked officers and chiefs and high level civilians in and out of our Navy hotel, if you will. I found out that I was really good at that. I was a very social person. I enjoyed the environment. I had just bought a truck that I couldn't afford. And so I took a second job, like it was like a what do you call it, like a graveyard shift as a front desk supervisor at this hotel. And that's where I had met my wife when I was 20 years old. And from the time that we met to the time that we got married was like less than 6 months. So there's a lot of things that you could think about that went wrong in our relationship along the way. We really didn't get to know each other because 3 months after we got married, I was on a deployment and then another deployment. And then, you know, back home for a period of time. Um, and we just didn't really have an opportunity to like foster a good relationship and understand each other before we decided to jump in and get married. And then we had kids and so on and so forth. So by the time I'm now operating three restaurants in San Diego, our relationship starts to kind of deteriorate. We realize that, you know, I'm unhappy in the relationship. I'm more kind of focused on my career because of the problems that we're having at home. I'm diving myself even further into my career, not being a supportive husband, not being a supportive father, other than financially. And we decided, or I decided, like, I think, I think at this time, like we need to go separate ways, right? At a minimum, we need to get a separation. Then time kind of went through, and I decided that I wanted to get a divorce. And then I went on, opened up two more restaurants, went on Top Chef, had a decision to make of like, do I go? Like, I had two decisions, two opportunities at the time, and one was, do I do I continue my path in Mexican cuisine and open up another restaurant in Mexico, which I had an opportunity at that time to do so in Guadalajara. Um, and at that time I was also living in Tijuana. I had moved down there for about 2 years, staying in an apartment close to my restaurant, traveling back and forth across the border, handling my other restaurants. But I was falling deeply in love with Mexico as a whole, their culture, their food, so on and so forth, the lifestyle that I was living down there. Or do I go back home because I had some family members that were going through some health issues. I had a new brother-in-law who I developed a really great relationship with. Um, and it was funny, he sent me a plane ticket because my mom's birthday was coming up. And it was right after we finished Top Chef. We finished Top Chef in August. This was November. My mom's birthday is, 2 days before mine. And he sends me this ticket and says, just come up. Like, why not? Right. So I went up and, he had his plan. He was like, I want to show you all the cool things that are happening in Spokane. Your food's amazing. It'd be really great up here in Spokane, so on and so forth. Took me around, celebrated with my mom, found out some health issues that were going on, and I had this decision to make, and I decided to move back home. So ultimately, I was leaving behind my uh, ex-wife, which we weren't divorced at that moment, but we were going through a divorce, and my daughters. And my daughters, to take them out of school that they were in would have been a really big mistake. They were in a private school. They were doing really great in education. Um, and so I decided, I have these businesses still in San Diego. I'm going to move to Spokane full time, but I'm going to be traveling down probably twice a month, which will give me an opportunity to see my daughters and they can come up and visit, so on and so forth. So this is going to work out, right? It was a lot harder than that, looking back at it. But yeah, so I moved up here on my own, and I had zero distractions at that point, right? And ultimately leaving a lot of my responsibilities behind, um, and starting kind of a new life. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, of like what was good, what was bad, what I've done differently, so on and so forth. Um, but it allowed me the opportunity to really kind of dig my heels in this city and make a really big difference in the culinary landscape.
Indeed. And now you're happily married and
Yeah, I got remarried.
yeah. She's awesome. I've known her longer than you have, I guess,
Yeah,
which is crazy to say, but it's true. And she's wonderful. And now you're a new dad. So you get the full reset. You've got it on. And I know you and I have talked. You have a great relationship with your two daughters, and they are both brilliant, like truly brilliant,
yeah.
and adventurous. And you guys have done some really fun stuff recently with your off road, your overland stuff, which is cool. Um, so let's jump in. I guess, do you remember meeting me? We've never chatted about this. I mean, I remember, outside of meeting you for that walkthrough with your realtor, way back when. It must have been 2014 or 15 when you moved back to Spokane.
Yeah,
Um,
2015. I remember
yeah,
that. I
yeah,
remember the
I remember
ceiling
that.
being super low, and I was like, I don't know. I'm a short guy, and you were like, oh, but we could lift the ceiling. I was like, that sounds crazy expensive.
Well, yeah, that must be what is now Hunt, because the
Yeah,
ceilings in the main space are like 15 feet. But yeah, down in the speakeasy, down in the basement, yeah. But we made
yeah.
it work. It's barely legal, 7 foot, but it's kind of cool.
Oh, it's
Um,
beautiful.
so, but outside of that, I mean, there was obviously at a period of time you were opening up a restaurant. We weren't really, we didn't know each other than that meeting. And do you remember when it was that you and I met again and started hanging out?
You know, honestly, I think it was when I was. What I remember was when we were invited to Nick Murto's house,
Mhm. Mhm.
when he still lived just right above downtown. He invited us over with it was Jeremy and Tony,
Mhm.
and we we were cooking some of the elk that you had, and just kind of getting together and hanging out. That that to me is what sticks out as like the next time like we had like
Same.
a good interaction.
Same. And we did a 2 or 3 or 4, I don't remember. We did several of those. Which is ultimately how we're sitting here today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was the birthplace. I That was the birthplace of Field the Feast. And, it's funny how we look back on things. And we've now come full circle, and I'm sure there'll be more loops added to the storyline before it's all said and done. Um, I guess when we were hanging out at those parties, it was fun, man. It was all chefs, and and I know, like, for me, I was like, well, at the time I was into food. I'd become more and more interested in food as a hunter, since. But I vaguely remember life before hunting. I was probably 4 or so when I first started kind of going out with my dad, obviously not with a weapon, but, you know, tagging along. And so for my entire life, to a certain degree, the food that's been on our plate has been something that has been hunted. Um, and then as I became an adult and we're in college, we were feeding our friends we were feeding ourselves, we were feeding our friends, but it wasn't good food. It was unfortunate because we had these really beautiful proteins, but we really didn't know what the hell we were doing. So, it's
Yeah.
like, well, grill that, fry that, like it's all overcooked. It's all seasoned terribly. It's all tastes like shit. But we ate it. And, at some point as I became, older and began appreciating food, I don't really remember the switch. I'm sure it had to do with the amount of protein that I always had in the freezer, right? And like, how do we experiment? My mom always cooked. She had a couple of recipes she did really well, but it wasn't an experimental kitchen by any stretch at growing up, And so, and she didn't have an affinity for wild game, and so it was like crock pots and things like that. So as I tacos, chili, spaghetti sauce.
Yeah.
Marinating the backstrap in a Coca
Stew.
Cola. Yeah, stews. Um, and good food, but just simple, and there's something to be said for that. But I think as I got older and I just something clicked in me and I was like, man, there's a lot of really, really beautiful meat in my freezer. I should probably figure out how to make this better. And I think what really took me across the finish line, or at least across the start line in my food journey, was those dinners with you guys. And I know we had some at my restaurant. I think and I've obviously eaten at all your restaurants, but I know we did like cook some wild game once when we opened Hunt. And I know we did several of those dinners together. And I was like, man, what these guys are doing is just so beautiful and delicious. And like, they're so into it. It's more than a meal. It is, hunting for me is a way of life. For you, food is a way of life. And for most chefs that I've met on this journey. And I was so enamored by the process and by the skill sets that you briefly touched on mother sauces earlier. Like these things that I'd never heard of. I didn't know what they are. I still have a ton to learn. But it's like, wow, if you know a few techniques, you can all of a sudden create a giant plume of additional dishes. And so at the same time, I was introducing you guys to like wild game and hunting. I know you'd cooked wild game in your restaurants, farm raised, of course. But at the same time, I'm bringing you guys elk to cook, and we're having a cocktail, and you're talking about the food, and I'm talking about the hunting. I'm learning from you guys the same time you're learning from me, and I think for me that is really the turning point. And we're talking like probably at that point it was like 2018, 2019 when those dinners were probably kind of going on, maybe even 2020, pre-COVID. But um, walk me through what it was that made you ultimately decide. I know we touched on this a little bit. We were sitting at those tables, and you guys were asking questions about the wild game, and I'm telling the hunting stories, and you guys are. I remember. I was like, oh wow, these guys are into it, and all of a sudden it clicked. It was like, of course they're into it. They they know everything there is to know about an ingredient. They know where the cows came from. They know the farmer that's raising the pigs. They know who's picking the morels. They know where the gardener that's, producing the produce. These guys are all like serious chefs. They're trying to procure local ingredients, responsible ingredients. And, I knew you were very serious about food, but I was like, of course these guys are into this. Why wouldn't they be? They've just never been exposed to it, probably never considered it, never at
Yeah.
least seriously considered it. So take me through your thought process. At what point were you like, shit, I want to give this a rip?
Yeah. You had provided me with um, a pizza belt to cook, right? And I don't remember what cut it was. And I was just like I've never, ever, ever cooked elk before in my life. The only thing that I knew is that it tends to be quite a bit like leaner, right? I just didn't, I really didn't know. And so I just thought about it, I was like, all right, I'm going to treat this like duck. I'm going to go, I'm going to go hot and fast and make sure that I don't mess this thing up because this guy went out into the woods, he harvested this animal. If I ruin this, like that's a lot of effort for a wasted piece of meat, right? But I also have respect for the animal itself. Not as much respect as I think I do today, right? Um, because now I understand like the amount of effort that really goes into it. So until you do it yourself, you're like, oh yeah, this guy just goes out into the woods. He takes a gun with him. An animal walks up to him and he shoots it. You know what I mean? Like, there's ideas that we have in our mind, and maybe I made that sound a little bit too easy in terms of like the way I was really thinking at the time, but I just didn't want to mess it up. And
I
you
think that's how a
obviously,
lot of people do think, though. I think that is a lot of people outside of hunting. I feel like that's what they believe. It's that
yeah,
simple.
yeah, right. And so I just, like at the end of the day, I just wanted, one, I'm around Tony and Jeremy, who are incredible chefs. Um, Jeremy is known for whole animal butchery and understanding game and things like that. And Tony has a great pedigree in where he's worked, in Chicago and what he was doing in Spokane at the time and so on and so forth. So like I didn't want to look like I didn't know how to cook something um, in front of these guys, right? So I was like extra careful on like what I was preparing, and it ended up turning out really, really good. And I've only heard like, oh, like unless you're a hunter, you just won't appreciate this meat, you know? And it was delicious. It was really, really good. And it made me want to cook more of it. Um, just like with anything, right? I enjoy the problem solving. People ask me all the time, like, what's your favorite recipe? And I always respond with what they don't want to ever hear. And it's what I've not cooked yet, right? I enjoy testing the R&D for me is what's really exciting. Trying out new ingredients, new flavors, new proteins, so on and so forth. Expanding my repertoire is really exciting for me. So there was that part of it, and then of course I'm hanging out with people that I admired in the industry. Even though I was just getting to know you, I knew that you were a business owner. I knew that you were a photographer. I knew that you had commercial properties in the city, and so and you were friends with Nick, and I looked up to him. I looked up to these chefs, and so like I wanted to make sure whatever I do, this is going to be really delicious, and that I'm executing on their level of professionalism or creativity or you know skill sets. So that was kind of like my first deal, but then I really didn't give much thought to what would it be like hunting other than like in that setting, right? I found it very interesting. I've always kind of had this feeling of like go out and get my own stuff, but not understanding the effort to it, the emotion behind it, so on and so forth. And then the lack of understanding of like game meat in general and how to prepare it properly. It was just never like a driving force for me, to be honest with you, right?
Yeah.
And rarely did I even see elk or venison or whatever on a menu. Excuse me. Um, so it was like, oh, and at the time, like when we met, like I was the seafood guy, right? So unless you were bringing trout or whatever, like I wouldn't have been providing that in my restaurant as a protein option. So again, it just wasn't it wasn't like a driver for me. But then when you brought those things to me, it was kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I loved hearing the stories. I love a good story. So, at that moment in those dinners, I think it was like, oh yeah, it'd be really cool to go hunting, but I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Yeah. Well, no,
We can talk
yeah,
about it
we
all we want. I just don't know if it's going to ever happen. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying that it's going to come to fruition.
It's funny. And how many times have we sat at a dinner party and had a couple of drinks and hatched the most grand of plans that have never come to fruition, right? The vast
More
majority,
often than
right?
not. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember vividly which cut of meat that was that I gave you, because obviously I had killed it, but it was also because it was my first time ever aging something. And that piece of elk, the first piece that you cooked, and you also cooked some ossobuco at another one of those dinners down the road, but that was a piece of that was a round steak that I had aged for 44 days. And I had brought that in a fridge. Like I had a beer fridge in the garage, and I just hung that thing on one of the racks and I was like, well, let's just see what happens. And it was all molded and, fairly gnarly. We took it into the kitchen and trimmed all that up and it was beautiful. I remember it smelled nutty. And
Mhm.
I was like, everybody's like, yeah, fuck it, let's try it. I said, well, it
Yeah.
looks fine, and it was delicious. It was the most interesting flavor I'd eaten. Hundreds and hundreds, thousands maybe of pounds of elk leading up to that moment, and that was way different. Mostly, I mean, you prepared it beautifully and all that, but it was mostly just that aging process, which I've explored further in the years since. But I remember vividly what piece of meat that was
Yeah.
and how cool that was. Well, we ultimately end up, so Chad, the premise of the story or the premise of the show is that I take chefs that have never been hunting and fishing and teach them how to procure these ingredients. So we started, I go by the motto, don't let perfection get in the way of something really good, or even letting it get in the way of just starting something right. And so we just kind
Is
of
that
jumped
your
in.
model?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure I wrote it
I'm
first. I'm
pretty
pretty sure.
sure. I'm pretty
I'm
sure
pretty sure.
that's.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it was me. I'm pretty
I'm pretty
sure.
sure. I'm pretty sure it's your wife.
I think it's probably been said for hundreds of years. But yeah, she probably said it and then I said it. But I'm gonna lay claim to it right here on this podcast today.
Great.
Uh,
You heard it here
but
first.
you heard it here first, folks. So we start, I'm like, we had no money. I called First Light. I'd been working in the industry. As you mentioned, I was a photographer as well. And I've been working in the industry for a while in the outdoor sports and hook and bullet market. And I had built quite a few contacts up in that space. And First Light were great friends and clients. And so I pitched the idea and they were like, yeah, let's do it. And they, from day one, have been a part of this whole process and sent us all the clothes, and I outfitted it, and that was, and a couple other partners sent us some stuff on some of the other hunts. The first one we did was a turkey hunt, which might have very well been the easiest turkey hunt I've ever been on. We shot 2 turkeys on opening day, like within
You didn't
like an
throw up.
hour. You did throw up. um it was a really steep, like 300-foot in elevation gain, I mean, I will say. I remember looking at
Yeah.
you. You were
Yeah.
hurting.
I feel like we were maybe 100 feet into that elevation. It
I
wasn't
think we
like
could
a
still
peak
see
on
the
top of the
truck.
mountain.
The
Yeah.
dome light might have still been on in the truck from the door shutting. It hadn't like timed out yet when you puked. But yeah, you rallied and we ended up we shot a turkey right out of the gate. There was just birds
Yeah.
everywhere. I'd never hunted this piece of property and got permission. It was some private ground in Eastern Washington, and it was chock full of turkeys. And I mean, it was, you guys, I'm sure were like, ah, it is. You just go in the woods with a gun and shoot it. See, I told you. Like, I told
Yeah.
you that's how this is. I mean, this shit's easy. And then we're literally like watching your bird, like, we're going through the motions and you're like, oh my gosh, the first thing I've, killed. And we're looking at the turkey and all of a sudden these other birds start gobbling and we like drop the turkey and dive into cover. And within a few minutes, there's literally a bird, another longbeard strutting on top of your dead longbeard, and
Yeah.
Tony shoots it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Wild.
it was like unbelievable. And I'm like, well, there it is. Yeah, that's how hard hunting is, ladies and gentlemen.
That's when they're
It was
tagged.
it was great. It was great, and we, it was cool. We plucked those birds, and you guys had that first experience. And I'd like to say you worked really hard for it, but it was really super super easy on that first hunt. And then I took Chef Claudette Sapita out on a fishing trip. We did a whitewater rafting trip down the Grand Ronde River for smallmouth bass, which is an invasive species in that system. No limit, summer, 3-day trip, phenomenal. Smack dab in the middle of COVID. It was great to finally like get out of the house, We went on the river for a few days. She had the time of her life. We're building some content for that. At the same time, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. I mean, it's a new foray into producing a show, and then fast forward another year or so, and we do a whitewater trip with you on a bear hunt, and and you end up getting a bear, which was quite the
Yep.
rodeo. um, and but it was a great experience for you. I think it pushed you. You should talk to me about that. But I think that pushed you to places you've probably never been. Not just physically, but probably emotionally and other places.
Yeah, no, that was an experience that I'll never forget, as long as I live. You know, um, you know, it was a first for a lot of things, right? I'd never been whitewater rafting. Um, I'd never been on a jet boat up a river. I've never seen rapids that big, in person. Definitely not on the water. Um, Insanely beautiful and treacherous. I'd never gone on a bear hunt. Um, I mean, there was so many firsts for me in that scenario. Um, you know, Camping in a tent in an area in which like bears are roaming around, the ones that we're looking for, so on and so forth, and then the you know the extremity of like climbing, right, and then a really dangerous environment, and months before my wedding. So my wife was letting me know, like, hey, dude, we're getting married and you're going on a bear hunt. Um, so that was pretty wild.
So yeah, it was it was a really interesting experience because I was, half the time we were up and about, I was freaked out, right? Um, hadn't been out in the dark hunting anything. We were climbing up rock faces that were, things that I've never, I don't have any experience in climbing. I'm wearing these new Scarpa mountaineering boots that I feel like a prancing deer in because like I just don't understand. Like they're so stiff. Didn't let them break in before I went out, so I'm having, issues with my feet. It's super hot outside. Um, it was just it was wild. And then I'm trying to keep up with mountain goats, right? I mean, you were just flying up the face of this mountain, and I'm like, man, I can barely keep up. I'm breathing super hard, probably operating at like 130 to 150 beats per minute, just breathing hard, thinking that I'm gonna die at any minute. And then I've got this thing in my mind of like, so we're climbing all the way up here and we shoot a bear, then we have to go get the bear. I'm already exhausted, like this is going to be crazy.
So it was pretty wild. I mean, at the end of the day, we're climbing up these extremely steep inclines. We have a raging river below us. Um, each time that I thought we were going to stop and find a vantage point, we just kept going, and the mountain was deceiving as all you could imagine. Like each time we get up to this next like little stopping point, you'd look up and there's like more mountain and more mountain and more mountain, and it wasn't just like any kind of grassy mountain or whatever. I mean, this was like giant boulders stacked on top of giant boulders, these little rock fields. I think you guys called them scurry fields.
It's great.
Um, it was just crazy. And then all while trying to like control my breathing, you're saying, watch where you put your hands because it's rattlesnake country. And I'm just like, whoa, man. Like, first of all, I've never seen a rattlesnake in the wild. So I don't even know what I'm looking for. So there's this like imaginary animal that's going to, jump out and bite me. And we're what, 6 days up the river from like, I'm dead. There's more things out here that can kill me than save me at this moment. And I was terrified, man. I'd like to say like, oh, I'm a big strong man, blah blah, and like yeah, if I'm to be extremely honest, I mean, there was more moments on that trip where I was worried about my safety than there wasn't. Um,
Oh
I mean,
man.
even just breaking the rafts down, getting them onto a jet boat, and then taking them up the river, and then getting the rafts out and blowing them all up. I was like, I'm spent. I'm exhausted, and we're just starting. So like, it was pretty wild. And then just not understanding. Like I've seen a couple bear in the wild when I was younger. Um, mostly um baby bears. Up close. And so I just didn't know what to expect. I think the biggest fears that I have in life are things I've not seen or experienced, or I don't understand their behaviors. It's like I think that's why like the thing I'm probably most afraid of out of anything in the world is the dark. Because if I can't see it coming or I don't know what's out there, right? Like it could be a field mouse and it sounds like a Kodiak bear. You know what I mean? Like I just don't have enough experience being out in the woods by myself to understand like what are the different noises. Um, and so there was just a lot of concern, right? Like I have too much of an imagination for it not to be what I think is the worst case scenario.
I do
Um,
I do remember the tent episode. I do remember that. I thought I was dreaming, but you were actually screaming bear, 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 bear.
at the
I didn't even
top of
wake
my lungs.
I, I I remember waking up the next morning and vaguely remembering it and thinking it must have been something I was dreaming, but no, you were screaming and nobody was
Well,
responding.
the cameraman did. He was like, I yelled, bear, 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 because then some started moving next to my tent and like brushed up against, and you guys are talking about like, oh, there's cows out here, and I'm like, well, why is there a cow up against my tent of all things, right? And the cameraman goes, bear, bear, nothing. And I'm thinking like you're gonna jump out of your tent. I don't even have a gun. You know what I mean? Like I'm the only one without a tent, probably for good reason. I'm the only one without a weapon. I don't even have a knife with me. Like I have no defense mechanisms other than my screeching voice, yelling bear bear. You know? Um yeah, that was a I'm pretty sure that was like our last night too.
It was. Yeah, because you'd already gotten your bear. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Sam had gotten his bear.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking his uncle was coming down to get me.
Oh man, that was funny. Oh, yeah. Well, so then, basically the way, very, very successful though. And I think you're now probably much more aware of how capable you are. Um, I think we don't realize obviously how capable we are until we face our fears or face an extreme circumstance or a exhausting, pushing ourselves to full exhaustion, how far we can go. And throughout my life, I've always found a level of joy in the misery, of like figuring that out personally, like what are the limits. And as we do that as humans, I think we are better for it and certainly understand what we are capable of to a much better degree than before, right?
I agree. Yeah, I think that experience, you kind of hit, you know, perfectly with that is I just didn't know one I was capable of doing what I did. I was pushed well past my limit so many times on that trip, right? Emotionally, physically, um, uh, and I felt great about myself afterwards, right? Like even if I wasn't able to harvest a bear, um, I know that I learned something about myself and what I can actually get through. I mean, a lot of people when they talk about my success and whatnot and my story, they use the word, you know, tenacity and grit and discipline. And so yeah, in my career that may be the case, but in that scenario, like I didn't go like, oh, you have what it takes. I was constantly doubting myself the entire time. Like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can go 10 more steps up this mountain. I don't know if I can, there was that moment where like I was trying to go down that hill and my legs were just like cramping up and wobbly when we got clipped out at night. Like, that's day one, man. I was scared to like that set the tone for what the entire trip was going to be. Was like, there's not going to be a moment for the rest of the time that I'm out here that is going to be easy, right? And if this is day one, it must get harder than this. But I don't know if I can go harder than this. Like it was. I keep a lot of this from my wife because she would never let me go hunting again, right?
Well,
And it was never like a moment where I was like in severe danger. Like I wasn't we weren't like we were going up some rock faces, right? I got clipped out. We got clipped out a couple times, right? But it wasn't like I was climbing 100-foot face of something, that was sheer cliff. It wasn't like we were at the tree line, in like the perfect spring bear territory, sleeping under the trees without any tent. I mean, you did that one night, but we weren't that high up, right? We didn't have like bait all over it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like accidents can happen, but you weren't putting us in like an extremely dangerous environment, right? Now, in comparison to what I have experienced, did we cross the line of danger a few times, like for my ability? Yeah, 100%. Am I glad we did it? 100%, right? Like going back to like realizing, coming back from a trip as difficult as that was, regardless of reward, the real reward was like, I know that I'm more capable than I think myself to be, to your point. And that was, it's changed me. It just, even the last couple of years, it's changed me. And furthermore, with the other hunts that we've done and things that I'm doing now in my career versus what I was doing in the four walls of the kitchen, it's been a drastic change in my life. And you know my fears are minimized. They're not gone, but they're minimized for sure.
how has it changed you?
There's a couple of things, right? We talk about like we've had these experiences in our lives that change us for the good, right? And when my son was born, he was born 3 months early, lived in the NICU for 100 days, um, you know, almost died a couple times. Like he was in a really tough spot. My wife was in a really tough spot because she had preeclampsia and she couldn't get her blood pressure down, and there's just a lot of like really scary things, right? And it put into perspective what was really the most important in my life, right? And it made my relationship with my daughters better. Um, it made me really take a really long, deep look into what was important in my life, and coupling that experience on the bear hunt with the experience with my son struggling through life, um, has just made me think even more about like, am I spending my time responsibly? Right? Am I doing the things that are gonna contribute to my health, my family's health, my family's security, so on and so forth, right? And then we go into current day events and the uncertainty in our government, and the things in our world that we see on the news every single day. And you know how do I take care of myself? And I'm not saying like, oh, I've turned into a doomsday prepper and all of these things, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. But like going on these trips and learning that I can go out and harvest my own meat and provide for my family in a way that I couldn't before. Um, that's changed like how I've thought about how we eat in our home, um, how I take care of my family, making sure that my health is a priority. Because that trip, I mean, all of those difficult, like strenuous moments of climbing up and down these rocks and being on the river, and the strength that I needed for those experiences, like I couldn't have done that on my own. Like if I look back in my current, not my current, but back then, the health that I had and the knowledge that I had, if I was out there in that wilderness, the chances of my survival in that environment were very minimal. And I don't think a lot of us stop to think about that, right? Like, if I was stuck out in the woods, could I get myself down the river and out if I saw no one, right? If no one came to my rescue and I was out there with the wildlife, um, or I was injured and so on and so forth, or if I had to pull myself up onto a rock face to get over this treacherous point, right? Like, I did not have the health, physically or mentally, to get myself through any of those situations on my own. And so those things like play it on repeat in my mind of like, what if there was ever an accident where I had to provide for my family in an environment like that, even if it was just like a rollover on the freeway going over a pass. You know what I mean? And so those things like come into play, right? What would I do in that scenario? How would I harvest food? How would I keep my family healthy? How would I get water? All those things like come into play, right? And maybe that's extreme for anyone that's listening to this, but it's a reality now for me. And so how that's changed my life now is like I'm studying how to be that for my family, like a provider more than just a financial responsibility. I'm a provider for security in health through my physical abilities, through the knowledge that I have about harvesting animals, survival, so on and so forth, which then also make me a better businessman.
Yeah, that's great. um, well, I'm glad that's the whole point of this, right? That's literally why we're doing it. To have those experiences and teach people all those, how to put meat on the table, how to be comfortable when uncomfortable or in an uncomfortable situation, or both uncomfortable
Yep.
and in an uncomfortable situation. I mean, that's just the reality of what hunters, especially most of us, you know, the vast majority, I use that word a lot, I guess, vast majority of that phrase, but it's most hunters are out here hustling, you know, we're not, paying to play. We're out here hustling and, putting ourselves in tough situations all the time, and appreciating and actually enjoying those opportunities in those tough and hard places. Even like you said, when success is not measured by a harvest, it's just the experience, that we find great success and joy in. It's the journey, um, more than the destination when it comes to hunting. And if that, in my case, if it was all about the destination and that involved putting meat in a backpack and coming home, I would be disappointed a whole lot more than I'd be, happy. And
Yeah.
because, there's a lot of days in the field where success doesn't come in the form of a kill. So that's what makes every bite so much sweeter at the dinner table. That's what makes every story shared over a cocktail so much more enjoyable. That's the time with your friends, with you, with my other hunting buddies in the woods. I love hunting by myself, but the camaraderie, the brotherhood and the sisterhoods that are built, in pursuit of wild game has bonded humanity since literally we stood up on 2 feet. And, it's just innate, it's in us. And, I enjoy the fact that you've been able to embrace that. And I hope you continue to be able to do so. Um, what has having your own, I spoke a moment ago about like enjoying each bite more. It's true for me. Like, I'm cutting into an elk steak or I'm eating something that we've made, and I find so much joy in knowing. I remember the entire hunt and all the little details, the wind direction, how cold it was that day, how far back that animal was, how strenuous it was getting that animal out, who I was with, you know, which direction that animal was facing when I released my arrow, how the blood trail was, every detail of that comes back with each meal, especially when I'm preparing it. I'm like, oftentimes I'm doing it on my own and I'm thinking back to that, and I pull that meat out and I'm like, oh, I remember now, not only this animal, but also butchering. I remember cutting this piece. I remember like I was saving a piece this size for this exact evening for this size group of people. I mean, to that level of detail. And I know, somebody like yourself who has literally prepared tens of thousands of meals at this point, there's no way you consider that level when you're preparing a store-bought piece of meat. How has it changed for you from a chef's perspective on putting food on your family's plate and your friends' plate that come to share your wild game? How has that experience differed from your chefing experience in the past?
Well, I'd say, I have a similar, you know, feeling every time I'm cooking venison, right? That I'm pulling out of my own freezer. It's amazing how I appreciate it far more than anyone that's at my dining table, right? And I know I'm cooking it well, right? Like I can tell when something's good or when something's bad. And I've probably now cooked the whitetail for about 20 different friends, right? And obviously the hunters that come over are like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! Thank you so much!" And they're sharing their elk, and I'm sharing my venison and whatnot. And um, but when I'm cooking it by myself, there's a lot of reflection in that, and it makes me want to make sure that I'm preparing it, you know, to the best of my ability. I think I reflect more on it when I have guests that are coming because I end up telling a story as to how I had harvested this animal and the experiences and the stressful moments and the celebratory moments and so on and so forth and the dumb things that I've done and um I definitely there's just a greater appreciation of what's on the table when you know what it took to get there, right? I'm not that since I have hunted with you that I haven't thought about that often, even about the product that's going on my table that is coming out of the market. But so much more I think about it when I'm eating something that I harvested myself, right? And um, just the meal, it brings so much more joy, right? I love the fact that my son loves to eat it. My wife is just like, I don't want to eat that. You guys eat that on your own, and I think someday she'll come around. But she's like, it tastes really good. It's just the fact that I know that you killed it is kind of a problem. I go, but wouldn't you? Like, I go into this moment of like, not like persuasion of like, wouldn't you rather eat something that I killed versus someone else killed? Like, I can tell you what went good and bad in this animal and why this is so much healthier and what its diet was because I was there and I understand the environment and the Jed the hunter that I went with, like he told me all the information, whereas like I don't know any of that about this chicken that we're eating tonight. Wouldn't you rather this? And she's like, I don't know, like maybe if it was a chicken and not a deer, but a deer, like they're so cute and you know what I mean? Like there's all these like reasons as to why. And I'm going through like every angle that I can to, you know, have my argument stand. But for me, it's far more enjoyable. You're not going to believe this. Like I might have 30 pounds left.
Yeah,
I've been
goes
eating
quick.
a lot. of that, and I'm like, oh, I need another deer.
I mean, dude, honestly, you know, most years, I shoot an elk. I mean, it's been a long time since I have had an elk. I mean, there's maybe in like the 20 something years that I've elk hunted, there might have been like a year or maybe two that I didn't kill an elk. But even on those years, I had some holdback. So I always hold back waiting for that year that's going to happen. And those were early years. It's been a long time since I haven't had an elk. But it still sits in the back of my mind. So I'm always saving, like, as summer rolls around, I'm like, we better keep like 30 or 40 pounds of this in case, you know.
Yeah.
But we typically go through an elk. Usually, I don't shoot a ton of deer. I am pretty picky on my deer, so a lot of times I won't get a deer. Now, if I didn't have an elk in the freezer, I would be shooting deer more often. But we'll go through an elk, sometimes a deer. Always have turkeys in the freezer. Always have fish in the freezer. Always have upland birds, waterfowl in the freezer. I mean, it becomes like I won't say a chore because it's not a chore at all, but it's meal
Well, it's like
planning
what
becomes extremely important. You know,
well,
it's
it's
like
like
we have
what
to
you
eat. Yeah.
and it's like what you and Jason were talking about. Like you're going to the grocery store, but the grocery store is in your garage.
Exactly. We go to the
Whereas like
actual grocery store for just, the side dishes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting to hear you guys talk about that. Like the grocery store is out in the woods, or it's your freezer that has the elk in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Well, let's fast forward real quick. We'll wrap it up after this story, but most recently, you were able to go on your first deer hunt. So, um we finally, put the whole entire episode together. We have a bunch of great partners that helped us raise a bunch of money and put together our pilot, of which you're the star, the chef. Went on your first whitetail deer hunt in my family farm in Kentucky. I think that's an opportunity, and this particular episode is not only an opportunity to introduce, the audience to who you are, but a lot of people don't really know who I am either. So it's on my family farm. It's where I cut my hunting teeth. It's where I first went hunting with my dad when I was 4 or 5 years old in a tree stand. I shot my first squirrel there. I shot my first rabbit there. I've shot deer there and turkeys there. So for me, it's a very special place. And, growing up, I often shared it with friends, but it's been a long time since I've taken a new hunter friend out to my farm, and it was a really cool experience to have you out there. What in your mind were you expecting for whitetail? This show is about taking chefs who've never hunted and fished before, and our relationship started as you had never hunted and fished before, but now at this point you actually have hunted a little bit. I think we're still true to the program, to the concept, but how was it in your mind going into the whitetail hunt? What were you thinking it was going to be like?
yeah, well, having a little bit of experience. I mean, to make a statement, I've not hunted with anyone but you.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? So uh, it's that having gone with you before, I had an expectation of how this was going to go. That said, I didn't, I drove from Washington State all the way out to Kentucky, right? So, I went across a lot of miles, a lot of different elevations and different types of uh, you know, environments, if you will, to get there. And so I really didn't know, like, are we going to be hiking on flat ground? Are we going to be hunting on flat ground? Are we going to be hunting, in a really wooded area? I knew that we were going to get up into a tree stand, which I had never done before. I've never seen a tree stand up close. So was, curious as to what that was going to be like. Um, my idea of what a tree stand was like, I don't know, probably like 15 feet off the ground, just standing on like a wood platform, like a deck. I didn't think of it as being anything other than that. And it was just, I knew that there was going to be a level of difficulty, as, you know, shooting anything, right? Um, I've seen deer run in front of my vehicle or run through fields and things like that. So my first thought was like, can I or will I be able to shoot an animal that's on the run? You know, um, or are we getting up close to an animal that's just going to be standing there? Like, I really didn't know what to expect, other than just I knew that there was going to be a challenge ahead of me. Um, and I didn't have a lot of time to shoot the gun, and I probably could have used that time a little more wisely before we got out there. But yes, I really just I didn't understand like fully what it would be like. Um, but I knew it was going to be exciting. I knew I was going to learn something. So getting out there and then seeing the land, I was like, "Oh, this is really cool."
Yeah, we got out there, and of course, it was great seeing you. You did drove like for 3 days or something, wasn't it? Uh,
Yeah.
and the weather, and wind doesn't cooperate, but it certainly didn't for that. We got there. I remember we shot your gun. You shot it great, and you had shot a few times, and we'd been talking a lot about shooting, and you had shot some for the bear hunt as well, and so we put some rounds down range, and you were pretty daggone dialed, and we were excited about it, and the first day we're like, you'd never climbed a tree stand. So we're going over that. We're talking about the harnesses and the safety lines and how the Prusik knots work and like how the steps might move just a little bit. So don't freak out. And, but we're going out on the opening day. It's opening day of rifle season, which is, almost sacred and certainly as important as any national holiday for most Kentucky whitetail hunters. And so it's a big day, and it's a day I've looked forward to. Growing up, I'm a diehard archery guy, but there's something special about opening day of rifle season in Kentucky, and so we're in the dark. We're going up to this tree stand. Of course, we have this thing set up. It's crazy because first of all, if you're hunting by yourself, there's a tree stand in a tree. The hours spent, and thank goodness my dad and Jason Camp did most of the heavy lifting on that. But they were able to set up 3 tree stands because I live in Idaho. So we're trying to get tree stands hung in Kentucky before the season. And we have to put 3 lock-ons, in a tree, one for the cameraman up high, one where we can set you and I can, take control of the weapon if need be, and certainly be able to talk to you during the hunt. So whatever's transpiring can be relayed quietly. And so we're climbing up this tree stand. We're all settled up here. We look like 3 turkeys roosted in this tree. You got this camera guy, you got 2 hunters. I'm not carrying a rifle, or maybe I am carrying a rifle. I'd shot a deer before you came with my bow, and so I was tagged out, but I had some doe tags, so I think I did have my rifle with me, and so we're settling in. The sun is rising. We're up there. Everybody's safe, and it's not too long, and a buck comes by, and I'm like, oh, here, this is gonna happen. This deer is reading the script. Now it's not a great big deer, but I'm like, Chad, are you going to shoot it? And you look up at me. Do you remember what you said? You look up at me like, well, would you shoot it? And I'm like, well, this isn't the time for that kind of conversation. No, I wouldn't shoot it. But I'm like, there's way too much to go into on why I wouldn't shoot it versus why you probably should shoot it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Well,
shot 100 of them.
I remember the conversation slightly different because before we got up there, you're like, what I want you to remember is that you shoot the deer that you think is right for you, right?
Right.
And I don't know what's a good buck or what's a bad buck, right? Like, also, we're 40 feet into the tree.
No, we're not 40, but we're probably every bit of 25 for sure. We're way up there.
Yeah, well, it seemed way up there, right? And so that buck comes out, and you saw him from way before I saw him, and he kind of looked a little squirrely, and you had mentioned that he looks a little squirrely, and you asked me if I'm going to shoot the buck, and for me, like, I probably should have just been like, well, if he's asking me if I'm going to shoot the buck, that's an okay buck to shoot, right? But I'm like, well, would you shoot that buck? And you're like, well, if I was like 18 or if this is my first buck or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so I shouldn't shoot a buck, right? Like, I'm 42 years old. Maybe I shouldn't shoot this buck. And that buck wanted me to harvest it so bad.
Oh, dude.
I mean, that buck was prancing and posing and giving me like, I, I don't know, 20, 30 kill shots. It
Oh
was
yeah,
like, it was
at
like it
like
was on
20
the cover
yards
of Vogue.
broadside. Yeah.
Yeah. To the point where like, then like standing right underneath me, right? Oh, I remember how much shit you gave me for not shooting that buck.
Well, I, I, let me back up. So when I said I want you to shoot a deer that makes you happy, what I meant and should have clarified was I didn't want you feeling bad if you didn't, we are exposed to the Instagrams and the big buck covers on the magazines and the TV shows where every deer is giant, right? And I'm
Yeah.
assuming I'm basing this on assumptions. Whatever you've been reading about whitetail deer hunting, whatever videos you've watched about whitetail hunting, you've seen all these great big deer. What I was inferring by shooting whatever deer made you happy is that shooting a small buck is absolutely okay. But I didn't
Yeah.
clarify that when I said it. And
No, I
when the
needed a little
time
more
came,
detail.
when the time came to clarify that, the deer was standing there. I was like, and then you like throw a question at me like, well, would you shoot it? I'm like, well, there's a lot of nuance to that question that I can't really have the time to get into as this deer standing here at 35 yards waiting for you to shoot it. But no, to be honest, no, I wouldn't shoot it, but that's not meaning you shouldn't shoot it. And it was funny. The conversation was hilarious. In hindsight, great that you didn't shoot the deer, you know? It was the opening morning. I wasn't terribly concerned. I thought we were going to have a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of decent deer on our farm. There's a lot of deer numbers in general. I felt like we were going to have an opportunity in a deer. So I was more surprised. I think that you, as a new hunter if that had been my first deer hunt, I would have shot that thing the first opportunity I had, but I was also, 9. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It wasn't the 47-year-old Jed. It was the 9-year-old Jed. So anyway, we don't shoot the deer. It's the only deer we see all day. We don't see another deer all day long. We're in a tree
Yeah.
till like noon, 1 o'clock. We climb down. I don't even remember where we hunted that evening. It might have started raining that evening. Was that when it started pouring rain and we didn't even go out? I can't remember.
No. So that day we were hunting on your dad's property.
Yep, across
Right,
the
that
road from
morning.
mine. Yep.
And then we went down for lunch, and then we went
That's
across the road up on top. We went up that big steep hill and got up in the tree stand up there. And then there was plenty of deer. They were
Yes.
just everywhere
Well,
and nowhere at once, as fast
you
as they
saw
could be.
the buck. We saw the buck that you ultimately ended up shooting.
Well, you
Do you
saw
remember
them.
that? Well, so did the camera guy, but neither the camera guy, you just never saw the buck. And to be fair, it was a poke. But from my perspective, it was just standing there like, here I am, have at it. And I'm like, Chad, do you see it? Chad, do you see it? Do you see it? You're like, I don't fucking see it.
Yeah, I was getting irritated because I was just like, you're seeing something that is like Bigfoot to me, right? Because like I can't see anything at all. All I see is trees. Then I'll see some movement, and then you're like, it's standing right there, Chad. It's standing right there. It's broadside. It's asking for you to shoot it. Can you see the buck? And I'm just like, Jed, I can't see the fucking buck. Like I can't see anything.
So anyway, you can't see this deer, and the camera, and then at some point the cameraman can see it. I can't see it. Then at some point I can see it. You can't see it, and then the cameraman can't see it. And then this buck walked, and I could tell it's a big deer. I knew this deer was on our property. I've been running, these Moultrie mobiles or cell cams. I can watch. I'm looking at them in Idaho, before I go. I know this deer is on the property. And I never laid my eyes on this deer. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's him. And I knew it was a big buck. And so the next day we climbed down, it gets dark. Oh yeah, we had all those deer. Do you remember didn't my dad have to come and get us like out of the tree, and we had deer like all around us or something? And my dad had to pull up in the side by side to try to scare them off. And we like get out of the tree. Was that night?
No,
it wasn't.
no.
That might have been a different night. I was in that stand.
I think that was a different hunt because
okay,
I would have definitely remembered a bunch of deer trying trying to
But
get at us.
Jason, somebody came and got us out of the side by side. Was it
So
Jason maybe?
no, so your dad did come and get us
Okay,
in the side by side.
okay,
Well, there was no deer.
okay.
Jason had shot a buck
That's right.
while we were up in the stand,
That's right.
and thank God, otherwise we wouldn't have had anything to eat.
That's right. That was a good night. That was a good meal.
Yeah.
I remember you did the heart.
Yeah, we did the heart and we did the backstrap.
Backstrap and heart. It was good.
Yeah,
And then we went to bed, and the weather like
turned to shit.
turned to shit. I mean, the creek was flooded. We were trapped on because you have to cross a creek to get onto on that part of the property we were camping. You have to drive across a creek, and it flooded. We couldn't drive out. We couldn't walk across it. Jason had a birthday party for his dad. It was like his 85th birthday or something. Jason couldn't get across the creek. He ended up having to walk the whole property and eventually found a log. But his truck was on the wrong side. So then the film crew, their car was parked on the right side of the creek. So they threw him the keys to the rental car, and he was able to take that. And we didn't hunt that whole day.
I stepped out of my tent, and I just had those short Grundon boots, and they filled up with water immediately.
Yeah,
because the water was that deep underneath my ladder.
yeah, on the camp spot. Yeah, it just so happened that my truck was like in water, and the poor film crew who was sleeping in a tent. Thank God, where I set the tent was like 2 feet higher.
Yeah,
But they were like on an island. Like their tent was like on an island with water.
so
I mean,
lucky.
it was pouring rain. So we didn't even get out. We didn't even get out and hunt that next morning.
We went up and we worked on skinning Jason's buck and
Yep.
breaking that down, and then the weather broke, and you were
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
kind of.
here's our time."
And I remember we were talking to the film crew because they have all these crazy cameras and all this gear and headphones and mics. And they're like, listen, we can't, because getting in a tree stand is an ordeal with 3 people. We've already talked on that.
Yeah.
And then they've got to set these camera arms up. They've got to set up all the mics, everything. And then if it were to start pouring rain like it had been, like it was torrential. And they were like, dude, we can't risk getting in a tree because our equipment could potentially get ruined, because it would take so long to get out of the tree. Everything would get soaking wet. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just try to hunt from the ground. I was like, I have a spot.
Which I preferred. I preferred at that moment too. I was like, I don't know if I want to get back up. But the second hunt, later that first day in the tree stand kind of ruined it for me. I was just like, man, I can't. I just, not that I don't feel safe, but like, I don't feel like I can move around because my body mass was as wide as that tree stand was.
Right.
So it was like, I couldn't, like, there was no stepping. There's a little shuffling going on, and it wasn't that I was afraid to fall because I had, safety harness and whatnot, but it was just like, and at the same time, I'm holding a gun. What could go wrong? You know what I mean? Like, so like when I found out like we were going to be hunting on the ground, I was like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're literally at that point, so now we're at the end of day 2 of a 3-day hunt. And, it's kind of like you had a bunch of tags. You had several doe tags, I think, and a buck tag. And I was like, maybe we should focus on, let's get a doe down. So we have some meat, and then, if a buck walks out, great. Tomorrow we can focus on a buck. The weather was supposed to clear up a little bit more. And so we're sitting there and 4 fawns come in. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
At different times they're coming in, they're feeding on acorns, and they're like, you're like, oh, and I was like, that's a fawn. That's a fawn. Oh, that's also a fawn.
Yeah. And then that little spiker show up.
Then the little spike showed up, and I was like, and we just, and you didn't want to shoot one of those, and which is totally fine. And then lo and behold, Big Papa just comes working his way up this ridge. I see him coming out of this bedding area, and I could just see flashes of antler, and I know I'm like, oh, that's a good deer. And it wasn't close. It came out, it was like 130 yards, if I remember right. And you're on my backpack. You have your rifle on my backpack, and the deer stops, of course, right behind a tree. And it's almost like I've felt this and experienced it so many times as a whitetail hunter. They almost sense your presence. We had the wind. That deer did not smell us, but even though we were 130 yards away, he just would not stop staring at our direction. He sat behind that tree for minutes and
It's like he
minutes
was playing
and minutes.
peekaboo, man. He was like
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Like
I
I couldn't
know.
even. All I could see was like his tail.
Yeah. And I see the deer start to move. I put my fingers in my ears. I'd forgotten my earplugs, or they broke. I think one of them had popped off or something, and I didn't have. And you had your earbud plugged in, and apparently, unbeknownst to me, you're talking to me about when to shoot or what to shoot or whatever, and I'm like, I don't hear you say. And the cameraman, Clint and you are actually communicating. Clint saw Hunter, thank goodness, and he's like, yeah, you can shoot him. He's quartering to you. You can just put it on him, and
Yeah.
then and then boom, and you absolutely smoked that deer. What was going
Yeah,
through your
man.
mind?
Well, I mean, before pulling the trigger, I mean, it probably was like less than a minute, but it seemed like a lifetime because he was just playing this game of peekaboo behind this tree, and I'm pretty sure that tree was probably the biggest tree on your property. Everything else was just sticks, right? Like I couldn't see his entire body. I could see like a horn sticking out and his tail. And I just remember Clint had told me something that stuck in my head about like because that one day the deer were just running all over the place and I couldn't see them. I didn't know when they were going to move and I didn't know how to anticipate, what they're going to do because I don't know the behaviors of these animals at all, right? And he said something that stuck with me, and it was watch their tail.
Mm-hmm.
Put your marker on where you're going to shoot, but try to watch their tail. And when their tail flutters, they're going to move. That means they're comfortable and they're probably going to take a step. And it's exactly what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tail fluttered, kind of like pushed a little bit out from the tree, kind of turned his body to look right towards me, and just that little spot. I mean, we are a long distance away from that tree, right? I'm looking through the scope, and I mean, less than a foot away from the tree, that far away, like I'm just trying to place this shot in this little, right behind that hind leg or that front leg, and I just pull the trigger, and I don't see anything from that point, right? Like I can't find the deer, nothing. I'm thinking, shit, I just missed this freaking buck. Like, oh, you're an idiot, and then I just hear, you got it, you got it, you got it, you shot it, you shot it, you shot it. Great job, and you're freaking out and having a great time, and I'm not quite there yet because like I don't even realize that I've got this deer, right? I take my shot, and of course the recoil and whatever, like I lose track of where the deer is. I don't even see it run until I saw it like after, you know, in the camera. And so like when
Oh,
you
when
guys
we
are like, you
watched it
got
play
it,
back,
you
yeah.
put it down, congratulations, great job. I'm just like, I didn't see it. Like, did I? And
Yeah.
and so like I think there was like this moment of like I didn't catch on to the excitement until I had to just buy that you guys said that the deer's down, that I shot it and it's
Mm-hmm.
killed. So it was and probably just being a beginner hunter, like that's part of it. But
You heart
I
shot
mean,
that deer at 130 yards. I've hunted that farm. Well, we've owned it as a family longer than I've been alive. And, you know, I've never shot a deer that far on our farm. We have a closed canopy forest. We're working on opening some stuff up, but really that ridge top, we just had a little bit of a clearing there, and I've never shot a deer that far on my property. That was a heck of a poke, for whitetail country like ours in the closed canopy forest. That was a heck of a poke, and I remember that deer falling over, and I was on the binos the whole time. So you shoot, I throw the binos up. Clint, of course, catches it all on film too. It was beautiful. The cinematography on it's great. The shot was great. The deer falls within sight. It's over in seconds.
yeah,
And then the celebration with you was so special to me. And I can. It's funny when I watch it back. It's I can see that you're like I'm so amped up. I'm like, that
yeah,
was a
and I'm just
monster
like,
buck. And you're
yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah.
You're like,
Yeah, if I would
and
have saw it, I probably would have been like freaking out. But like I was just like, I did?
yeah. You did it, man. You did everything. You executed flawlessly, and um, we end up going, up to the deer, and it's just it's a really special buck. It's one of the bigger deer we've ever killed on our farm. We just don't have an overabundance of monster deer running around our property, and I've never killed a deer that size on my property. I've killed some nice bucks on our property. I've never killed one that big, and we've killed some bucks that big, but it has been a very long time, like decades, since we've
Yeah.
put a deer down that big, and and here you are, your first deer hunt on the second day you've ever hunted deer. And, at 130 yards, you heart shoot this buck. And, I was as happy for you as I have ever been for myself, and I think that's what's special about this stage of my hunting career is the ability to share with my children and to share with friends like you. This show has offered me an opportunity to share so much that I enjoy. Watching you shoot that deer is as exciting. I think I would probably be even more excited for you to have shot that deer than for me. I've shot a lot of deer, and
Yeah.
it was cool, man. I was fired up. And
It was, I
everybody was
mean,
so happy for you.
yeah, it was an incredible experience. I mean, I remember, I mean, not to take away from like the the experience of like walking up to deer and seeing just how big it was and like, wow, like I did this. It's amazing achievement. I'm gonna be able to fill my freezer and be able to, share this with my family and my friends. And I learned some new skills. I learned some new things about myself. But like, I remember the moment of when your dad showed up the next morning and the just huge smile on his face. Like, like I'll never forget. I mean, I'll never forget the moment of shooting it with you and that experience, but just seeing your dad like so stoked about the buck I shot and like it was just really it was I mean the whole trip was special, right? Like getting to know Jason and getting to know Clint and his team and spending more time with you and getting to know your father and your mother. Like this was more than just a hunt, right? It was I can't even like I don't know if there's words that can really explain like what it meant to me to be out there, because I didn't really have an expectation other than like I'm gonna go on another shoot with Jed. Um, I may or may not get a buck. I wanted to get that buck more for you than I wanted it for myself, which is funny, like how our roles like change, right? Like you were saying you're probably more excited for me getting that buck than you would have been for yourself, and I was more excited about me getting that buck for you than I was for myself. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
wild to think that, like looking back at it, like I'm very like I appreciate it more than ever now that I was able to get that for myself and my family, and it was an achievement. It taught me a lot about myself, but like I was more stoked about the achievement for you than I was for my own self, which is so
Well, that's
bizarre. But
friendship, right? That's
yeah,
friendship. That's
yeah,
that's that's why we're both happier for each other than maybe we are for ourselves. That's just a
yeah,
testament to the bond built doing this. And no, I was that's great to hear. That's I've never heard you say that. That's cool.
yeah,
But no, I would have been happy for you no matter what. The great thing about, listen, I shoot elk. Do I love big bulls? You bet. Do I love big bucks? You bet. But at the end of the day, my man, like for me personally, if I haven't had an opportunity at a mature deer, I like the challenge of hunting mature animals. I think it's, well, there's a lot to go into from a herd perspective on management and different things, but um, for me at the end of the day, it's about like when the season's coming, if I've got X amount of days to hunt and it's getting towards the end of that, it doesn't matter to me. I'm putting something in the freezer, and
yeah,
I would have been I would have been as happy for you about, having a deer if you'd shot that doe. But there's something special about a mature animal. There's not very many of them on the landscape, and enjoying the antlers on the wall, being able to look, you're shooting a doe, you're probably not going to like put her head on the wall, right? It's not because she's not a special animal and she didn't nourish your family for a year, because that's what it's all about. But there's something special about being able to look at a set of antlers until the day you die and remembering that story. And the bigger they are, it makes you feel, I mean, I've got a bull here behind me. I don't know if you can see it in this video, but it's not my biggest bull, but it's by far my most special bull. My dad was standing beside me. That buck that you shot, by far more special than a lot of deer that I've ever killed, because you were sitting there right beside me, and you're probably feeling the same way. If you go shoot a buck next year, doesn't matter if it's bigger or not, you may not feel as special as you did on that hunt for the various reasons. But it's so cool that you're also able to have a full freezer and a really nice set of antlers to enjoy.
Yeah.
Weren't you saying you're going to mount it on the foot of your bed or something?
Yeah. There's a joke, right? When I got our bear, I had told my wife, I said, we weren't even married yet, and we were about to get married, and I said, well, I'm not necessarily sure if I want to have another child or not, but if we do, I'm getting a bear rug, and we're gonna make that baby on that bear. And she reminded me over and over and over again that will never happen. And it did not, unfortunately. But my son is so feral, you would assume that we did. And then so I came home, and I don't know, maybe it's something about hunting, but she asked me, like, would you ever think about having another baby, just so Walker has a sibling and this and that? And I said, you know what? Not really. But if we are going to have another child, because I think it's a decision we make together, I'm going to put that deer, I'm going to mount it right on our footboard of our bed, and I'm going to have you hold onto those antlers, and I'm going to give you another boy. And she said, like hell you are. And I was like, listen, if we're going to have an agreement of having another child, I'm going to get to choose how we're going to make that baby. It's never going to happen, but I'd love it. I'd love for it to happen. It's a great story, especially if you have a boy, tell him, like, here's how you're made, son.
Well, good luck to you on that, Chad.
Yeah.
Do keep us posted.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a phenomenal spot to end this.
I'll post it on Only Does.
On Only Does. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
This is why I love you. No, this has been great, Chad. It's awesome to catch up with you. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I'm so happy you've become a hunter, and we haven't touched on Trail Feast. I'll put a link in the show notes on your new venture. You've gotten out of the restaurant industry. You've started an overland cooking experience for folks that we'll share it with them on another time, but I'll put a link up and share your Instagram with everybody. Share the website for people to go check out. Chad's gone all in. Chad didn't just go hunting once and one and done. Chad has devoted not only his career to it now, but he's excited to bring his kids into the wilderness and hunting and fishing, and he's just turned it's in a way turned your life around. And I don't know how much I had to do with it, but I'm glad that you're getting outside way more than you have in the last couple of decades. And I think it's a healthy and really exciting way to spend your life. And I'm super happy for you, my man.
Thanks, brother. No, you had a lot to do with it. So thank you for putting the bug in me.
You bet, man. It's been a pleasure, and there'll be more to come. Well, Chad, thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for listening to Field to Feast podcast. We'll be back with you again with another episode, yet to be determined. But thank you again for listening. Chad, have a great day, man. It was awesome.
Cheers, brother. Thank you.